In the heart of Lagos's vibrant Balogun Market, 28-year-old Chima, a charming fabric trader, had been secretly planning the ultimate Valentine's Day confession to Zainab, the beautiful hijab vendor who had captured his heart. With his nerves on edge and his heart on his sleeve, Chima puts on his best attire, ready to unveil his undying love. But fate has other plans. What happens next will leave you breathless. Watch till the end to uncover the shocking twist. The sun cast a golden glow over Balogun Market as traders bustled about, arranging their goods and calling out to passers-by. Among them was Chima, a fabric trader known for his keen eye for quality, materials and his smooth way with words. His shop, tucked between a spice stall and a jewelry stand, was always filled with customers drawn by his friendly demeanor and honest dealings. But despite his success, Chima's heart had long been captivated by something, or rather, someone else entirely. Zainab, the hijab vendor across from his stall, had become the highlight of his days. She was a woman of striking beauty, with eyes that held both fire and kindness. Though she often shot down flirtatious advances with sharp retorts, there was something about Chima's persistence that made her lips twitch in amusement rather than annoyance. Their conversations, often playful, sometimes exasperated, had become the rhythm of their days. Yet beneath the banter, Chima felt something deeper stirring. Today, he was determined to take a step forward, even if it was just a small one. "Chima, you should be selling words, not fabrics," Zainab teased, arms crossed as she eyed him from behind her stall. "You talk too much, and you listen too much," Chima shot back with a grin, leaning against his counter. "Maybe that's why my business is booming while you're still here scowling at me." Zainab scoffed, but the corners of her mouth betrayed a smile. Their exchanges had become the highlight of her long days at the market. Though she would never admit it, she found herself looking forward to their daily sparring. But Chima was growing tired of merely exchanging words. He wanted to know more about the woman behind the witty remarks, the one who hummed softly when arranging hijabs, and whose eyes softened when she helped an elderly customer. Yet he also knew that in their world, feelings were complicated. He was Igbo, she was Hausa. She came from a family that valued tradition, and he wasn't sure if tradition would ever allow what he was beginning to feel for her. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Chima made a silent promise to himself. He would find a way, somehow, to tell Zainab how he felt. But fate, as always, had other plans. The scent of roasted plantains and fried puff-puff filled the air as the evening crowd swelled in Balogun Market. Chima watched Zainab from his stall, pretending to adjust a bolt of lace fabric while stealing glances at her. She was haggling with a customer, her voice firm but fair, her hands moving gracefully as she folded a rich blue hijab. "You're staring too much, my friend," a voice whispered beside him. It was Emeka, his childhood friend and fellow trader. Emeka nudged Chima with a knowing grin. "If you keep looking at her like that, she'll charge you extra just for breathing near her stall." Chima chuckled, but there was a weight in his chest. "She's different, Emeka," he admitted. "I want to tell her, but she's Hausa and you're Igbo," Emeka finished, shaking his head. "Her family will never agree, Chima. Are you ready for that kind of war?" Chima sighed. He had thought about this many times. Nigeria was changing, yes, but some traditions held fast. He didn't just need to win Zainab's heart, he had to win against the expectations that bound her. Across the market, Zainab caught Chima's gaze and held it for a second, too long before quickly looking away. That single moment gave Chima hope. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the only one feeling this pull between them. The next morning, Chima arrived at the market earlier than usual, heart pounding with a new resolve. He had made up his mind. He would ask Zainab to share a meal with him. It wasn't a love confession, not yet, but it was a step. As he set up his stall, Zainab approached, carrying a small tray of steaming akara wrapped in brown paper. She placed it on his counter without a word. Chima raised an eyebrow. "For me? Are you finally admitting you like me?" Zainab rolled her eyes but didn't take the akara back. "A customer gave me extra. Eat before you start running your mouth too much." Chima chuckled and took a bite, savoring the crisp edges and soft inside. "You should open a restaurant, not a hijab stall." You'd make millions. Zainab smirked. And then what? Compete with your fabric empire? There was a brief silence before Chima cleared his throat. Zainab, would you have lunch with me today? Just as friends. For the first time, she hesitated. Her fingers played with the edge of her scarf, and Chima saw something flicker in her eyes, uncertainty, maybe even fear. And she looked away. I have to think about it. Chima nodded, hiding his disappointment. He didn't realize that Zainab wasn't just worried about eating lunch with him. She was worried about what it meant. Because deep down, she knew she already cared more than she should. Zainab's heart was restless as she arranged her hijabs that afternoon. Saying yes to Chima's lunch invitation should have been simple. But nothing was simple when it came to love, especially for a woman like her. Her family was traditional, and their expectations were clear. She would marry a Hausa man, preferably one chosen by her father. The thought of disappointing him made her stomach twist. And yet, when she was around Chima, she felt he challenged her, made her laugh, made her think. Zainab, her cousin Amina called, breaking into her thoughts. You seem distracted. Are you okay? Zainab forced a smile. Just tired. Amina nodded, but studied her closely. By the way, Uncle mentioned something about a suitor coming soon. You should prepare yourself. Zainab's heart sank. A suitor. That meant her time of choice was running out. She turned her eyes to Chima's stall, where he was laughing with a customer. Could she risk everything for a love that might not even be allowed to exist? As the sun dipped lower, she made a decision. Tomorrow she would give Chima an answer. But would it be the one he wanted to hear? The next morning, Zainab arrived at the market with a mix of determination and anxiety. She had spent the night turning Chima's invitation over in her mind, weighing her heart against the expectations of her family. As she set up her stall, she stole a glance at Chima. He was already busy with customers, but she knew he was waiting for her answer. Taking a deep breath, she walked over, stopping just at the edge of his stall. Chima looked up, surprise flashing in his eyes before he smiled. Zainab, to what do I owe this early morning visit? She crossed her arms, trying to keep her voice steady. Lunch, I'll go with you. Chima's grin widened, but he kept his response casual. Good, I know just the place. Zainab didn't miss the way his shoulders relaxed, as if he had been holding his breath. A small part of her warmed at the thought that she had that effect on him, but another part reminded her this was dangerous ground. They met at a small buka, tucked away from the main market's chaos. The scent of jollof rice and suya filled the air as they settled into a quiet corner. You're sure about this? Chima asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. Zainab sighed. It's just lunch, Chima. Maybe for you, he said, stirring his drink. But for me, it's a little more than that. Zainab looked down at her plate. She knew it was more than that for her, too. As they ate, their usual banter softened into something else. Chima told her about his childhood in Enugu, about how he had come to Lagos with nothing but a few fabrics and a dream. Zainab, in turn, shared stories about her mother, about the nights they would sit together sewing hijabs by lantern light. For a while, it felt like the outside world didn't exist. But reality came crashing back when Zainab's phone buzzed. A message from her father. Come home early today. There is someone I want you to meet. Her stomach clenched. She had been so lost in the moment that she had almost forgotten about the looming suitor. Chima noticed her change in expression. Everything okay? Zainab forced a smile. Yes, I just need to get back soon. But as she watched Chima laugh at something the waiter said, she felt something twist inside her. Could she really let this slip away? That evening, Zainab arrived home to find her father already seated in the parlor, speaking with a tall, well-dressed man. Her mother was busy serving tea, her expression unreadable. Zainab, come and greet our guest, her father said. She stepped forward, forcing a polite smile. Good evening. The man, who introduced himself as Ibrahim, smiled back. He was polite, well-mannered, exactly the kind of suitor her father would approve of. But as the conversation went on, Zainab felt no spark, no connection. Her mind kept drifting to a certain fabric trader with a lopsided grin and too many jokes. So, Zainab, Ibrahim said after a while, I hear you help run the family business. That is admirable. A woman should be industrious. She nodded but didn't reply. She wasn't sure if he was complimenting her or setting up an expectation. Either way, her heart wasn't in this conversation. Later that night she lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her father had been pleased with the meeting. She knew what that meant. Soon, the pressure to accept Ibrahim's proposal would begin. But what about Chima? She squeezed her eyes shut. No matter which path she chose, someone would be hurt. But could she really afford to choose her heart over her family? The next day at the market, Chima noticed the distance in Zainab's eyes. She laughed less, her replies were shorter. Something had changed. "Zainab," he said softly when they found a rare, quiet moment. "Talk to me. What's wrong?" She hesitated, fingers gripping the edge of a hijab. "My father introduced me to a suitor last night." Chima felt his heart drop. He had known this day might come, but hearing it aloud made it real. "And what do you think of him?" he asked carefully. Zainab exhaled. "He's fine, respectable, everything my father would want, but not what you want." Chima's voice was barely above a whisper. Zainab met his gaze, and for the first time she let the truth slip past her lips. "I don't know what I want anymore." Chima reached for her hand, hesitating, before gently brushing his fingers against hers. "I do," he said, "and it's you." Zainab's breath caught. She should pull away, should remind him that this was impossible. But for that moment she let herself stay, caught between love and duty. Zainab pulled her hand back as if burned, her heart racing. "Chima, you can't say things like that." "Why not?" His voice was quiet but firm. "You feel it too, don't you?" Zainab swallowed hard. "It doesn't matter what I feel. My father, my family, they would never allow it." Chima ran a hand over his face, frustration evident. "So what? You'll marry this man just because they say so?" "I don't know," she burst out, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know what to do, Chima." He exhaled, stepping closer. "Then let me tell you. Choose what makes you happy, Zainab. Choose us." For a long moment they stood in silence, the noise of the market fading into the background. But reality snapped back too soon. Amina appeared at Zainab's side, eyes darting between them suspiciously. "Zainab, father is looking for you," she said, her tone unreadable. Zainab nodded stiffly, not daring to look at Chima as she walked away. But as she left, her heart whispered a truth she wasn't ready to admit. She wanted him too. That evening, Zainab sat across from her father, his eyes filled with quiet authority. He had heard something, maybe from Amina, maybe from someone else in the market. "Zainab," he began, his voice measured, "I hear you have been spending time with an Igbo man. Is this true?" Her hands clenched in her lap. "We are only friends, Baba." Her father studied her for a long moment before sighing. "You are not a child. You know how these things work. Our families have expectations, and I will not have my daughter bring shame to us." Zainab's throat tightened. "Baba, what if I don't want to marry Ibrahim?" Her father's face darkened. "That is not your decision alone to make." She lowered her gaze, feeling the weight of his words. In her father's eyes, love was not a choice, it was a duty. That night she lay awake, torn between two worlds. Was there truly no way for love and family to exist side by side? The next morning, Chima was waiting for her. She almost walked past him, but he gently touched her arm, stopping her. "Zainab, we can't keep pretending this isn't real." His eyes searched hers. "I don't want to lose you." She hesitated, heart pounding. "And if my father finds out?" "If he forbids it." Chima's jaw tightened. "Then we fight together." For the first time, Zainab considered what that might mean. Could she truly stand against her family for love? Taking a shaky breath, she whispered, "Meet me after the market closes. We need to talk." Hope flickered in Chima's eyes, and for the first time in days, Zainab felt like she could breathe. But as she turned away, she failed to notice Amina standing nearby, her expression troubled. The market had long since emptied, leaving only the distant echoes of traders locking up their stalls. Zainab stood near a quiet corner, her heart thudding in her chest. She wasn't supposed to be here, if her father knew, if anyone saw. "Zainab." She turned to see Chima emerging from the shadows. his expression a mix of relief and longing. "I thought you wouldn't come." "I almost didn't," she admitted, wrapping her arms around herself. "But I needed to talk to you, away from the market, away from watching eyes." Chima stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Tell me what you want, Zainab. Not what your father wants, not what tradition expects. What do you want?" Zainab closed her eyes for a moment. "I want you," she whispered. Chima exhaled sharply, as if he had been holding his breath. He reached for her hand, his warmth grounding her. "Then we'll find a way, no matter what it takes." But as much as Zainab wanted to believe him, she knew love was never that simple. The next morning, Zainab knew something was wrong the moment she stepped into her home. Her father sat in his chair, his expression stormy. Amina stood beside him, refusing to meet Zainab's gaze. "Where were you last night?" her father asked, his voice dangerously calm. Zainab's stomach dropped. I went for a walk." Her father's eyes burned into her. "A walk with an Igbo man?" Zainab shot a look at Amina, betrayal cutting deep. Her cousin had told. "Do you think you can shame this family?" Her father continued. "Do you think you can defy me?" Zainab trembled. "Baba, please, just listen." "I have listened enough," he roared, slamming his hand against the table. "You will stay away from that man. Do you hear me?" Tears pricked at her eyes. "But I love him." Her father's face hardened, his disappointment heavier than any slap. "Then you are no daughter of mine." Zainab gasped, but he had already turned away. Amina placed a hesitant hand on her arm, but Zainab jerked away, the pain of betrayal too raw. She had known this would be difficult. She hadn't known it would cost her everything. Chima knew something was wrong the moment he saw Zainab approaching his stall. She walked with purpose, but her eyes were red, her face pale. "My father knows," she whispered. Chima's heart clenched. "Zainab! He told me to stay away from you. He said I am no longer his daughter if I don't obey." Chima inhaled sharply, reaching for her hands. "We'll fix this. I'll go to him, "No," she said, shaking her head fiercely. "You don't understand. This isn't like your family, Chima. If you go to him, he will never accept you. And if I disobey, I will lose everything." Chima's grip tightened. "Then let's leave." Zainab's breath hitched. "What?" "Let's leave Lagos, start over. If they won't give us their blessing, we'll make our own path." Zainab's heart ached. The thought of running away was tempting, but was love worth turning her back on her family forever? I need to think," she whispered, stepping back. Chima let her go, but his eyes held a promise he would wait, no matter how long it took. Zainab spent the night staring at the ceiling, her heart and mind at war. If she chose Chima, she would lose her family, the people who had raised her, loved her, given her everything. But if she chose duty, she would lose the one person who had made her feel truly seen. Her mother entered the room just before dawn, sitting beside her on the bed. "Your father is hurt, Zainab. He doesn't understand why you are willing to risk everything for this boy." Zainab's throat tightened. "Because I love him, Mama." Her mother sighed, brushing a gentle hand over her head. "Love is beautiful, but it is also dangerous when it stands against tradition. I just want you to be sure. Are you ready for what this will cost you?" Zainab closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "I don't know." Her mother squeezed her hand. "Then you must decide soon, before the choice is taken from you." At the market, Chima watched Zainab with worry. She hadn't been herself all morning, moving mechanically through her work. When their eyes met, she quickly looked away. By midday, he couldn't take it anymore. He walked over, his voice gentle but firm. "Talk to me, Zainab." She hesitated before pulling him aside, away from the curious stares of other traders. "My father has made up his mind. He wants me to marry Ibrahim. If I don't, I lose everything." Chima's jaw clenched. "And what do you want?" Zainab exhaled shakily. "I want you, but I don't want to lose my family either." Chima's heart ached for her. He wanted to tell her that love was enough, that they could make their own way. But he also knew the weight of tradition, the pain of being cast out. "Then I'll wait," he said softly, "for as long as it takes." Zainab looked up at him, her heart twisting. Could love really be enough to fight against everything standing in their way? That evening, Zainab's father summoned her again. This time his voice was colder than before. "You have until the end of the week to accept Ibrahim's proposal," he said, his tone final. "If you refuse, you will leave this house with nothing." Zainab's breath hitched. "Baba, please." "No more arguments," he snapped. "You must choose, Zainab. Family or disgrace." Tears burned her eyes as she lowered her head. How could her own father see her love as disgraceful? As she lay in bed that night, her mother's words echoed in her mind. "Are you ready for what this will cost you?" Because the time to decide was running out. Zainab moved through the market like a ghost. Her usually sharp tongue dulled, her vibrant energy drained. The deadline her father had set loomed over her like a dark cloud. Traders who once greeted her warmly now whispered behind her back. Word had spread. Zainab, the obedient daughter, was defying her father's wishes. Chima noticed the change. He hated seeing her like this, trapped between duty and love. As she arranged hijabs on her stall, he walked up to her and said quietly, "Come with me for a walk." She hesitated. "Chima, I don't think—" "Please." His voice was soft, pleading. She sighed and nodded. They weaved through the market until they reached a quiet spot by the Lagos Marina. The waves lapped against the shore, and the salty breeze wrapped around them like a silent witness to their troubles. "I can't lose you, Zainab," Chima finally said, his voice raw. "But I also don't want to be the reason you lose your family." Zainab turned away, staring at the water. "Then what do we do? Because I feel like no matter what choice I make, I lose something." Chima reached for her hand, squeezing it. "We fight. We prove to them that love isn't a disgrace, that we can honor both love and family." She swallowed hard. "And if they never accept us," his grip tightened, "then we make our own family." Tears welled in her eyes. Could she be that brave? Could she risk everything for a future that was so uncertain? But as she looked at Chima, his eyes full of love and unwavering devotion, she realized something. She had already made her choice. The following evening, Zainab returned home with her heart pounding. Her father sat in his usual chair reading the newspaper. He barely looked up when she entered. "Baba," she said, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. "I have made my decision." Her father finally lifted his gaze, dark and expectant. "And?" Zainab took a deep breath. "I will not marry Ibrahim." Silence, a tense, suffocating silence. Then slowly, her father folded his newspaper and placed it on the table. "You choose shame, then?" "No," Zainab said firmly. "I choose love." Her father's face twisted with anger. "Then leave. If you step out of this house to be with that boy, you will never be welcomed here again." Her mother gasped, stepping forward. "Husband, please." "She has made her choice," he snapped. Zainab's heart broke, but she forced herself to stand tall. She turned to her mother, her voice shaking. "Mama, I love you. I love you both. But I can't live my life for someone else's expectations." Tears streamed down her mother's face, but she didn't argue. Instead, she pressed a small bundle of money into Zainab's palm. "Take this, and take care of yourself." Zainab whispered a choked thank you, then turned and walked out, leaving behind the only home she had ever known. Outside, Chima was waiting. Without hesitation, she walked into his arms. "You did it," he murmured against her hair. She closed her eyes. "Now we begin." Zainab moved in with an old friend, Halima, who had a small apartment in Yaba. The transition was painful. She missed her family, missed the familiarity of home. But when she woke up each morning, knowing she had chosen her own happiness, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known before. Chima was by her side every step of the way. He helped her find a new space in the market, just a few stalls down from his own. Business was slow at first. Some traders still disapproved of her defiance, but she held her head high. One afternoon, as she arranged her scarves, an older woman approached her. "You're the girl who left her father's house for an Igbo man," the woman said, not unkindly. Zainab met her gaze. "Yes." The woman smiled slightly. "I hope he is worth it." Zainab glanced over at Chima, who was joking with a customer, his laughter rich and warm. She smiled. "He is." The woman nodded and handed Zainab some money. "Then give me 3 hijabs." It was a small moment, but to Zainab it was everything. Life was not easy, but it was theirs. Zainab and Chima worked hard, supporting each other through the challenges of running a business and navigating a love that many still frowned upon. They had each other, and for now, that was enough. But late at night, when the market had quieted and the weight of the day settled on her shoulders, Zainab sometimes wondered, would her father ever forgive her? Would he ever understand that she had not chosen shame, but love? Chima noticed those moments of sadness. One night as they sat on the rooftop of Halima's apartment, he held her close. "He will come around," he murmured. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day." Zainab rested her head against his shoulder. "And if he doesn't?" Chima kissed the top of her head. "Then we keep moving forward, together." And for now, that was enough. Back at home, Zainab's father sat in the parlor, staring at the door she had walked out of weeks ago. His wife placed a cup of tea beside him. "You miss her." He scoffed, but didn't deny it. "She is still your daughter," his wife said gently. He grumbled, but remained silent. Days later, he found himself at the market. He hadn't planned to go near her stall, but his feet carried him there anyway. He watched from a distance as Zainab spoke with customers, her eyes bright, her stance confident, and beside her, the Igbo boy, watching her with so much love it was impossible to ignore. For the first time, he wondered, had he been wrong? One evening, as Zainab was closing her stall, she turned and froze. Her father stood a few feet away, watching her. Her heart pounded. Was he here to disown her again? To shame her in front of everyone? Instead, he simply said, "You look well." Zainab swallowed hard. "I am." Her father exhaled. "I do not approve, but you are still my daughter." Zainab's vision blurred with tears. It wasn't a full acceptance, but it was something. She took a hesitant step forward. "Would you like some tea?" Her father hesitated, then nodded. And just like that, the first crack of reconciliation formed. Months passed, and while the wounds of the past were not entirely healed, they were slowly fading. Zainab's business thrived. She and Chima grew stronger together, their love weathering every storm. One evening, as they walked through the bustling market, Chima took her hand. "Marry me, Zainab." She looked up surprised. "Are you serious?" He grinned. "Completely." A laugh bubbled from her lips, full of joy and relief. "Yes," she whispered. The market square, once the place that nearly tore them apart, had now witnessed the beginning of their forever. And for the first time in a long time, Zainab knew she had chosen right. Lessons and encouragement. But love requires courage. Zainab and Chima's love was not easy, but they chose to fight for it. True love sometimes demands that we step outside our comfort zones and make bold decisions. If you truly believe in something, have the courage to stand for it, even when the road is difficult. Too, family and tradition matter, but so does happiness. Zainab loved her family and respected tradition, but she also knew that she had to make choices that aligned with her heart. It's important to honor our roots, but we must also carve out our own paths in life. 3. Patience heals wounds. Though Zainab's father was initially against her choice, time softened his heart. Healing and reconciliation don't always happen overnight, but love and consistency can mend even the deepest divisions. Or support systems are everything. Chima never gave up on Zainab, and her friend Halima provided a place for her when she needed it most. Surround yourself with people who uplift and support you, especially when you face tough choices. 5. Love is a journey, not just a destination. Zainab and Chima's story didn't end with struggle, it ended with growth. Love isn't just about finding the right person. It's about growing together, facing challenges, and building something meaningful. If you're facing a tough decision in life, whether in love, family, or personal growth, know that you are not alone. Life is full of difficult choices, but the right path is always the one that brings you peace and true happiness. Keep believing, keep pushing, and never let fear stop you from choosing what is best for you. Did you enjoy Love in the Market Square? Do you love stories that inspire, challenge, and move you? Then subscribe now to join a growing community of story lovers. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss new stories. Like and share this video with someone who needs this message. Your support keeps these stories coming. Thank you for being part of the journey. Love you all.